All right, welcome to the build.
The build.
My name's Tom Spencer. I'm a LangChain ambassador and tired traveler. um, with me is Cameron. How are you,
I'm
buddy?
Cameron. I'm a LangChain nerd, absolutely, and really all things AI, especially lately. Model context protocol has been my focus. Yeah, Tom gets to hear
You
plenty
are the
about that.
resident.
Yep.
You are the resident MCP nerd on this show. All right, let's get into it. All right, in this show, let's cover what we've been up to. We're going to dive into agent architectures. And then Cameron, you're going to give us a bit of a demo on a few different approaches using LangChain, some of the demos that you developed. But before we get into that, what have you been up to in Hatton?
This week I've been working on a lot of MCP stuff. So if you want to hear about that,
Okay.
I can tell you. Particularly around the registry. That was about a month ago. They announced that. It's not officially live yet, but I've been experimenting with what that will look like so that ready to go when it goes live. And then, of
Yeah,
course,
cool.
they came out with a new specification 2 weeks ago and more developments, especially on authorization. Um, Seems like this is the biggest release so far. People are really excited about, but we don't have to spend the whole time talking about MCP either.
Well, I'm keen to hear about that. I had a couple of conversations this week with different people in that space. What is that? Yeah, what was this is the release from the centralized kind of group of like the organizing entities, right? Is that
Right.
what you're talking about?
Right. And it's what I've heard about on different podcasts and different interviews is it's everybody's excited. So they're having a bit of a challenge deciding, like who gets to make decisions, who gets to be involved. And saw one of the founders or the, developers at Anthropic was talking about that. So it's moving quickly, but
Yeah, I had a long conversation with one of the guys at Ortho, then
mhm,
the authentication tooling for developers, and they are pushing really hard into a release around agent authentication, specifically in how you interface with all your MCP servers. So they're going really hard, like lots of different companies are, right? How do you? I know we've spoken about this a lot. Like, how do you manage permissions across agent types? How do you defer back to the user for your authentication? What's the response pattern? Like all that stuff. Like, yeah, it needs to be figured
exactly.
out.
That's the biggest thing with the latest spec is it puts it more in front of enterprise. So you can control central authentication where to this point, a lot of people have just been building OAuth into each individual server, and that's problematic for a number of reasons. So I'm really excited. I think everybody is. I'm not the only one. But so yeah, that's been taking up my week so far, pretty much.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, I've been in New York this week, so I came over for the Vercel ship demo day conference hype session, which was great. I quite like Vercel, what they do. Like, yeah, the community around it's pretty sick. And yeah, it was great. It was a great event. And then met up with some people, went and had lunch with the LangChain guys today. So shout out to Nick for buying me lunch. Thank you. It'd be interesting to, yeah, we were talking through some of the architecture approaches with him as well, which will be interesting to get to. He's in the applied AI team at LangChain and how they think about it as well. So yeah, it's been great, been really good. I don't know. Do you use Vercel much?
I've started to a little bit more lately. I know it's super popular, and that's what's driven me to dive into it. To be honest, I do a lot more with Cloudflare, and I watched most of the sessions yesterday for Vercel, and that's why I'm really excited to hear more from you. And maybe there are things that I should be leveraging that I haven't been so far. Um, what I do like is it's super intuitive, super straightforward, and if you've played with V0, then it's like a natural bridge to working in the whole Vercel environment, which is really cool.
Yeah. Yeah. So they sprung up around Next.js, right? So it was sort of like a, a hosting platform for rapidly deploying primarily websites and content rich websites. And then they pushed really hard into AI and vibe coding and just being able to rapidly deploy apps that you create pretty quickly. But it has morphed and grown over time. So it's obviously a lot bigger than that. They didn't have that many announcements. Like I think in the past we've had more product announcements. I think from them, like they're basically trying to position themselves as like AI cloud, which I'm not sure how, like, yeah, I'm not sure how much of that kind of thing is more as hype versus like just, any actual product updates. Although they launched like an AI gateway, which is kind of like, model router
Mm-hmm.
product. They've changed a few different things like in their compute. And they also launched their own sandbox. So, a virtual container to effectively run agents.
Was
Other
the
than that,
Agents SDK wasn't announced yesterday, right? Or was that already available?
the AI SDK is their like SDK for building AI apps. That's been around for a while. Unless I missed it, I don't think they had any like significant announcements on that yesterday.
Well, maybe I
Um,
misunderstood, but I thought that was one of the major developments was a brand new AI agents SDK. So we'll have to
tell
find
me,
out.
I must have bailed because I must. Well, they talked about that when they talked about the sandbox, but I must have bailed to another session. Um, if that was the case, I don't know how much. Yeah, I don't believe so, but I could be wrong on that. There were some really cool sessions from one of the best ones was from the founder of Profound. Did you see that one?
Yeah, but I don't remember. Was that the SEO,
But I
AEO?
don't remember.
Was
Yeah,
that the AEO
AEO.
one?
Yeah, I found that
Yeah.
really interesting because, like, obviously, marketing background or growth background, that's like just an exploding distribution vector that people are trying to get their hands on in terms of like, or get their arms around in terms of understanding how to optimize for discovery in chat or, and he calls it answer engine optimization. It's basically like when someone goes to an AI backed kind of product to get recommendations, answers, understand something, how do you optimize your web presence, your product for that experience? He shared some pretty crazy stats. So SEO, like the SEO agencies and SEO people who track a lot of these things around like how much traffic you're getting from certain keywords, things like that. Like, there's like from year on year, some of these key benchmarks have declined for key search terms by about 35%, which is a massive change. If you're, I don't know, an e-commerce website that relies on, say, Google Shopping or even like, building software products, that's a huge shift. I actually met a few people who use that product. They said it's pretty good. It's pretty interesting how they actually build it. I think you could probably build your own version of it as a test. Um, they have like a ranking performance benchmark. So you could go to them and say, hey, I'm Google Cloud and I want to understand what my mention percentage is in all of these different LLM chat interfaces, ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, all of those. And they don't have the volume. So they can't give you like, all right, this is the number of people. Like obviously Google would have that for themselves, but they can't tell you like that data from say ChatGPT. But what they do have or they have created is like you go to them and say, hey, I'm Redis. This is great. This is an actual example that I heard about. I'm Redis. These are the things that I care about, caching. When people are looking for caching options, for example, as a developer, have a bunch of queries and search terms, like the amount of 100 of them, with a whole bunch of other kind of sub questions. And then they build that as an eval set, effectively, like a whole rich eval set. And then every night they go and run that eval set for you against all of the models and the providers. and then in real time update your percentages. So you've got like 25% mentions in, these queries with these LLM providers around caching solutions for a publishing website, for example. So you can track it in real time. It's kind of like a chat rank, I guess is kind of what you would call it, kind of like we would call page rank.
Right. Yeah, it's like reinventing the internet, the entire way that it works.
Yeah. And what is interesting is like there's the next step from that, which will be like chat rank optimization that will occur because they go and get search links, right? That's what they just go and do, like with the search tool. But then there's this intermediate step with the combining those things and how those get presented to the user, like a list. Give me the top 10 database providers for a publishing company, for example, or a publishing website. That's not necessarily just the links that they get. Like there's an optimization approach that they would put up on top of that these tools you would then need to start monitoring, and they'll just change them behind the scenes, right? Whether it's the model changes or they have some sort of approach that emerges. So yeah, that is going to be the next way people grow companies, brands, products. It's going to be the next, like we were talking about on the system prompt conversation around, there's a distribution vector if you can get your products listed in the system prompt. This is the bigger version of that.
Right.
Just like when I say, I want to buy a new toaster or what's
Right.
the best pair of shoes for a runner, whatever it is.
Yeah. Is that where the LLMs.text tie-in came in? Where you mentioned it's kind of like, it would be like a system prompt. Because I remember him talking about that. And or if you're a developer, you've seen the LLMs.txt standard or spec. And he touched on that, but I can't remember exactly where that ties in.
Yeah. So similar to SEO, there's like content optimization and technical optimization, like when you were doing a website. Like, so there's the content side, and then there's like structuring your content for discovery via LLMs, which is what you're talking about. LLM text is like that. I spoke to a few people who are using these tools, and they've said, yeah, we've got one. We're not exactly sure what it's doing, whether it's actually that impactful. But what they did say to me is like, where they saw massive uplifts in their share of chat completions is when they structure their URLs as questions that might match, which isn't like 100% new, like SEO experts talk about that all the time, but just in the URL or page structure, like within like your code level structure to be traversable easily is different to like traversal for just optimizing for the Google kind of bots that would scrub your site. Like it's completely different. And so that's the technical side. He didn't go into the content side very much. And there are campaigns they've got, like in this example of the guys that I spoke to who used them, they run campaigns. Basically, they just like, all right, let's try and get, an example would be Cloudflare. They launch a new product. Let's try and run a couple of campaigns on optimizing our content to see if we can boost completions in like chat rankings for that new product. This is going to be an industry, like the whole thing is going to explode. We're going to have answer engine optimization agencies and experts and people on our teams and stuff. Like it's going to be enormous.
Yeah, it's
given
funny
that
you
already a
mentioned that
billion
one.
people are using them, every day.
I was going to say, it's funny you mentioned that one because that was the one I probably knew the least about, and I marked as need to go back, listen to that again, find out more because it was really interesting.
Yeah. What was sick is they had the guy, Brendan Ike, the guy who created JavaScript. And just like he was just mobbed at the end. There's just like so many dudes in, like it was basically 90% dudes. All of us were wearing black. All of the Vercel people were also wearing black. So it was super hard to figure out who was who. And there's just this mob of black dress, like nerds, just like lining up after it just to get his autograph or talk to him. He's an absolute legend. Now he runs Brave Search. The other really cool one, which you probably saw, was the Sanity CMS talk. Did you watch that breakup with the CMS? Sanity is like a headless CMS, but I didn't realize how enterprise grade that thing is. So they had the guys from Morning Brew, and they're a publisher, Get Up. I used to work in the publishing industry. Or digital publishing. This is why I was fascinated by it. So Sanity can basically creates these modular kind of content engines that you can run different parts if you have a content business as a publisher or if you're a marketer, whatever. And you can write, create emails, marketing emails or publishing emails. You can create content, you push video, whatever, like all that sort of stuff. But those Morning Brew guys put up a stat. I took a photo of it, blew my mind. They've got 6 full-time engineers and they do 2 billion emails a year. They do 50 million ARR and like millions and millions of hits a day with only 6 engineers as a publishing kind of team. And then I spoke to a bunch of them. Like I went out, shout out to those guys. I hope you all got home okay. So we went out afterwards. But like they're pretty relaxed. Like I was talking to them, just like, how do you do that? And like, yeah, it's pretty impressive infrastructure. Like it's pretty cool. Like a lot of people say like Vercel's just like toy stuff. That was not a toy operation. Like that was hardcore. So yeah, it was really great.
To be honest, that was my impression of Vercel as well. And lately, the more I get into it, I'm like, okay, this is not necessarily what I thought. It's not as toy-like as what I thought. I hate to say that, but that was my impression.
No, I think it's it's hard if you're like a wrapper on top of AWS. How do you differentiate, right? Because they are an AWS wrapper.
It was interesting to hear. I can't remember her name, but she was talking about when they would go to customers and say, "Yeah, our storage is on S3," and these bigger operations be like, "Well, that's just you need all these different layers and all these different things, and maybe that's changing."
Well, one of the things I think it's going to be very useful for is as agentic coding tools get adopted more, platforms like that are great because they interface really well with those platforms and do sense checks, like live sense checks on your pull requests. Like I found now I'm using Claude and Codex. You push it through and they integrate with, say, a GitHub repo. It automatically opens up a branch. That branch is then connected back to your Vercel instance. It can live preview that. I did a session with StatSig, which is like an experimentation toolkit on top of any website, any app, but it's integrated really well with those guys. So you can run experiments. So you could be running experiments live using agentic coding agents. And these tools like Vercel connects that kind of flow and workflow really well in a seamless way. Yeah. So I think that's why they will kind of win. I know the big clouds have tried to build competitors for this, but none of them have had the developer adoption. So that, and it's just like, yeah, I just think they've built a great community. Yeah, I really like it.
Well, the CEO, Guillermo, man, he's such an inspiration. Like,
yeah, he's a legend.
Just that alone.
I accosted him halfway, like in the middle of the day. I was like, mate, what you guys have done is incredible. What you built, I was like, just got to shake hand. And then I was like, I got to get out of here before one of your minders tells me to piss off. This like crew of people walking around with him. It's pretty funny. So yeah, so that was a lot of fun. That's what I've been up to. A few other things have caught my eye since we spoke. Do you want to chat through those, Nat?
Yeah.
Some of the releases and stuff.
Yeah. What do you have?
Well, Sam Altman dropped it in a conversation that ChatGPT is coming out by the end of summer, he reckons, which will be cool. They don't usually talk about that. We just usually talk about that sort of stuff. So that'll be interesting to see what they release it in. He's pretty coy about it. I'm not sure if it'll be reasoning, multimodal, just an upgrade to 4.0, whatever, like whether it's a combination or like what he did say that they are working to is just an excellent general purpose model. So will this just be a general purpose integration of, O3 plus 4.0. Hopefully they resolve all this naming shit as well.
I think people will appreciate that. I know I will.
One thing that I thought was really cool, I don't know if you saw this, is Google released their CLI coding tool.
I saw, yep, saw that.
And not surprising, I guess, that they were getting into that. But what was surprising is the fact that you can run it basically for free.
Right.
To a really, really generous allowance. Like they're going for, like, I can't imagine what that's going to cost them. I think it's 1,000 requests a day for free.
Yeah, I mean, it's a direct response to Claude Code, right? Codex. I mean,
Yeah.
So Claude Code now you can run with your monthly subscription, but with Gemini, what I read is you don't even need Gemini CLI. You don't even need a subscription at all, right?
Yeah. You just need a Google account. And it's like, that's pretty wild. Like, you imagine how many developers they'd be on the handle of, just to like through Google Cloud, for example, and they'll just start using it. Like, I guess that's what you can do when you're sitting on billions of dollars worth of cash. Is you can
Yeah,
take
with
those
that,
bets.
they're obviously going to be training on the data, right?
You would assume so, yeah.
Yeah, I
But
mean,
then, like,
there
how good would that training data be? I don't know.
it's
It might,
funny. If you know me, I'm like preaching privacy and security and these things all the time, but depending on what you're working on, I don't know, man. Like when this stuff is starting to be so cheap and even to the point of it being free, um, I'll use it. I've
yeah.
been waiting forever for and it's not going to be anytime soon, but like Llama local models to be capable enough to do coding
Mm,
and different things. And yeah, I mean, basically we're here. It's just not local and it's not private.
yeah.
So
I don't know about like the quality. Yeah, I don't think the quality would be high. I actually think it's a marketing thing. Like, I think they pick the developer audience well, and developers don't like paying for anything really. So they're just like, let's just give them a bunch of stuff for free. That's what I reckon.
yeah,
But interestingly, on the Google chat as well, I was reading a bit more about at the 808 protocol, and this week they kind of gave that to the Linux Foundation. They said like the Linux Foundation is going to be the custodian of it rather than Google, and they're trying to
I
make it
didn't see
like,
that. Interesting.
I don't know, like I don't think it's going to change a significant amount of like what actually occurs because it's an open source project that they will still be involved with. But I think they're trying to basically get a bit of distance from it so that other companies can have more confidence that they'll be able to build on and contribute to it without Google
Hmm.
dominating, probably. Which is kind of cool.
It looks
Yeah.
exactly. Have you installed it or anything?
No, not yet. I was just reading the documentation. I want to dive into it more, but I'm waiting for them to release their agent space, which they still haven't done. They announced that at the developer conference. They still haven't released it. So
Yeah.
you can
Well,
obviously deploy to Vertex and stuff, but there's this agent space kind of. The whole idea is that agents have a model card that defines their skill set, and then you could that's like a communication protocol that you can define. But I really want to see what the product they build on top of it, right?
right.
Mm.
Yeah. Well, I've just installed it.
Um,
I haven't done much with it, but it looks like it's pretty much the same as Claude Code from what I can tell. So we'll see. Maybe
yeah.
we'll get into that more next time, maybe.
Well, I think the key difference with 808 is that they define it as, or the goal is to develop a protocol that enables effective low latency and low kind of error rate agent to agent communication where the agents have been built by different people effectively, the different organizations. So, and that's a pretty significant challenge. So it's different to MCP, right? And it's different to LangChain, like that is a different kind of goal.
I
Um,
think a lot of people were under the impression initially that it was separate from MCP, but they're complementary
it's
technology.
complementary, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's like not sort of not the same. They do have their own like tool calling or skills, they call it.
Mhm.
As well. But I think they're also contributing. Aren't they also a contributing member of the
I
MCP
believe so. Yeah.
organization? Yeah. Um, yeah, a couple of other things caught my eye. Build.io, which is like a headless CMS that I quite like. They released their like Fusion product, which is pretty cool. It's basically kind of like a V0 competitor, but then also V0 has like a design mode now, which is pretty sick. So you can actually get a bit more kind of fine-grained control over like padding and things like that. So you don't have to, like if you're ever building on V0 and you're like, oh, I just really want the padding around that headline to be like, I don't know, 5 pixels more. That is such a precise request that a model will just rebuild all the page, probably install like 10 more packages just to shift it in the wrong direction. So they've added in this like design feature relatively recently. So that's kind of quite cool, where you can like interact with the design or the UI over the top of the model.
Yeah, I actually used it while I was listening to the conference. I was working on actually a web interface, and I was like, let me just use V0 in the background. I'll build it in parallel. And I think I'll actually continue working on the Vercel version. I cloned it, and I think I'm just going to keep working on that myself outside of V0, but it turned out better than the one that I was working on in parallel. So
yeah, I want to work on like an ideal workflow process. Maybe I can present that in a couple of weeks, but like the ideal workflow and integrated from Figma into V0 into like a Claude code kind of agentic execution that automatically deploys into Vercel, and like how you would manage that process. So you've got different agents doing front end, back end, like setting up infrastructure, all that sort of stuff.
so we should
Yeah,
set
what?
up a demo with, I guess, with what you're talking about. I don't know if it'd work with like the linear integrations and stuff like that. Talked a little bit about that, and using
Yeah,
multiple agents to keep track of tasks and collaborate together is that's coming very fast. We're here.
yeah. I think. Well, I'd be worried if I was linear. All of these guys, they've all launched all into their agentic coding workflows, really tight, effective GitHub integrations. And so I can just see everyone just, I don't know, just using like GitHub projects and then managing everything through there if your agents are so tightly coupled into GitHub.
Yeah, I started using a security tool, and it scans the repo, applies the vulnerability fixes, and then like in Cloudflare and Vercel and all these providers, you set it up so that when you commit to your GitHub, it automatically redeploys. So like the other day, I wake up and I'm like, oh, my app is patched and redeployed. I didn't
Yeah,
do anything.
it's unbelievable. I saw a product that was coming out that is a agentic um agentic penetration testing agent swarm that could do like, I don't know if you've ever done like a SOC 2 compliance audit or something like that. Like it's an absolute pain in the ass. You got to go and pay like an agency a lot of money. If you could just say, all right, well, I've done an agentic like pen test across everything and it takes a couple of hours. Like it's pretty incredible, really. Yeah, those sorts of tools you could have it running all of the time. I know one of the guys from the Anthropic team mentioned it in an interview. He's invested in a company that's similar, which is like agentic cybersecurity kind of swarms that constantly fight off agentic attacks. If you imagine like you've got team of agents working for like someone who's trying to hack into a certain data set or whatever, then you have a team of agentic defensive agents like scanning and in real time responding to attacks and threats. It's pretty nuts. I don't know. You deep in the cybersecurity world? It's not something I know a great deal about unless I have to do a SOC audit.
Not as much lately. In my most recent company that I worked for, I was a lot more. So like you mentioned the SOC 2 and the compliance stuff, couldn't even tell you how much time I've spent and coordinating teams to do all of the information gathering and working with regulators and things like that. And you're exactly right. I mean, the capabilities and the way that you can automate things now, I wish I would have had those before. That's for sure.
Yeah, I'm waiting for someone to basically just come along and say, here is an agentic replacement, AI replacement for all of those things. Like I have no idea why the software industry handed off its security credentialing to the accounting industry. Like that makes no sense to me. Um, yeah, like passing one of those audits, in my opinion, has nothing really well, not nothing, but very little to do with how secure your product actually is. Like,
I can tell, yeah, for sure it doesn't, because
and your team. Like, it's obviously more than just your product. It's your processes and your people and how your people behave. And like, I can imagine like it would be way easier to use agents to test a bunch of your, like employees, like how they respond to phishing attacks would be way more effective through an agentic engine than just saying, yeah, we, you know, everybody's done our training program and we can prove that. Like,
Right. On top of that, the regulators are usually a little bit behind, and the people doing those assessments are not necessarily super technical engineers. And you spend a lot of time answering questions that are not really applicable. And you're like, hey, aren't you going to ask me about this other thing instead of like, this is
yeah,
not a big deal, you know?
well, that's why I was shocked to learn that the standards for SOC 2 and also ISO come out of accounting practice kind of credentials, right? So yeah, it's actually like people doing it have a financial accounting background and then they go through the credentialing process, which is, I'm sure, very technical, but like doesn't make any sense to me that that would be the case.
I mean, it's all
Anyway,
because of
rant
Enron,
over.
right? I think that's,
Well, surely like it should come from our industry. Like it should come from the tech industry. It should be a tech-led thing.
yeah, you'd think.
Couple of other things that I want to mention. I might just share my screen to show these to you. Was the the ByteDance video model. So I sent that to you earlier. Yeah, you check it out.
And I did spend about 2.5 minutes playing with it. It's so fun.
Yeah, but I'll go there through this side quest of micro evals. So this is artificial analysis. This website. These guys evaluate models for different things, different performance metrics, price, cost, you know, time to first token, all that sort of stuff. And they launched this sick like micro evals thing where basically rather than just like performance on a benchmark test, it's like they just do like a chat arena, but for different requests. So like this one's, you know, physics generations, image generation. So they say like, here's the prompt at the top, and you can just see the type of response that each of the models gives. So which is like create animation with a cool interactive thing based on my cursor. It's kind of cool because you can see like, well, what's the personality type of each one that comes out. It's pretty nice. And then this is the Claude. This one is from Claude 4 is sick for this. Like compare that to the Gemini one. And then this is Mistral and Llama, Paul Llama. And then there's one in here I wanted to show you, which was awesome, which is there's arcade racing games.
And they have a playground, right? Can you run your own or comparisons, arena battles?
You can do comparisons because they have an arena where you can like answer questions. I'll show you that when I go into the video model in a second. Where is this? It's audio one. It's sick. It's so cool. It's like, yeah, best ASIC artwork, one-shot games, medical quiz. Maybe it's here, arcade games. Yeah, here we go. This is arcade games, like each one, but then they've got this one, JS create an 8-bit soundtrack you would expect to be an 80s style racing game. And then it, like so it's like, what does each one think an arcade racing game would sound like? This is 04. Well, that's a lot of fun. Anyway.
See, Tom,
Go and
this
play
is
with
where
that.
I told you I've intentionally tried to stay away from things like this. But then I talked to you and there are legit uses for them. And I'm like, oh, maybe I missed out. But then it's hard for me to, it's so fun that it's hard for me to not just play around the whole time.
Waste all day. Yeah. I know it's hard. I think like, well, the reason why I think that's kind of cool is it's like micro evals is basically it's not really helpful when you're trying to use an LLM or make a decision around what to use if they all get about the same 90% score on like a math benchmark. But it is helpful if you're like, I want to build, a 3D visualization engine, and you can evaluate against that. So it's kind of like narrow band evaluations to make you to make a better choice, or at least start your experimentation. So that's why I thought it was kind of cool. But you're right, you do get lost in them. This is that leaderboard, though. This is that evaluation tool that I was saying that they have. So they run these over products, right? The reason why I'm showing you this is because we can check out the leaderboard next, so you got the reference. So like this one is obviously not as good. So I'm going to say, all right, well, I prefer this one on this prompt to paragliders, going cruising, a shooting star in the sky and a person pointing at it. Well, obviously this one is better. Yeah. Anyway, so this leaderboard here, they have all the video models and the either prompt to video, text to video, or image to video performance. And this ByteDance new seed dance models smashing it over VO3. And then on image to video, it's even better. And it is excellent, this ByteDance model.
So the big deal is it's open source. VO is not, right?
I don't know. Is it open source?
Well, I guess I don't know. I assumed, since they have it on Replicate, but maybe that's not necessarily the case.
Well, I think these guys broker with model providers as well. Yeah, so these like Replicate and FAL.
Because VO.
So for example, like VO's not, but just like Anthropic's available in like Google Cloud. I believe that's the same, but I have to double check that. I don't think it's open source, but it could be. But yeah, this seed dance model. It's sick. This is what I was using to build the intro video that we're going to attach to this start of this episode, right?
Well,
so Minimax.
I'm waiting.
You're waiting for it to drop?
Yeah, man. That's so good.
And then we'll show it off. So this is this Minimax video model as well, which is one I was using for that. Mainly because it's a lot cheaper. So VO3 is good, but it's quite expensive. But the seed dance one isn't as expensive as well, and it's so much better. So I'm just amazed that these keep coming out. It also made me think that these platforms will invest or overinvest in these models because it basically attracts users. So for example, ByteDance made it available as a model in their video production tool CapCut to try and drive content production. So I'm assuming once Meta gets their act together on this $65 billion spending spree, that they're going to start doing the same thing and start driving content production more effectively through the models that they develop and keep for their own platforms to keep users on there. Whereas for Google, it's not as relevant because it's more about advertisers using it. And so product builders like us in the cloud.
In my little bit of experimentation with the video models and the image generation models as well, is for me, it takes so many iterations. Or I don't know if that's because I'm maybe a perfectionist or I'm not prompting it correctly. I mean, what's your take on that? Yeah. Do you think that will change inside an app like CapCut?
A couple of things on that. So there is a big community of people who emerged around this probably after the initial diffusion models came out. So there's like a professionalism around the prompting approach. If you're not used to using these, often you get shit results because you don't have those very refined prompting skills that have been developed. Like if you go into any of the Discord servers for any of these companies, there's like a lot of like very fine-grained kind of prompting techniques. And now if you go back to that creative deep dive I did in episode 1, you can check this out in some products, but those prompting refinements are being extracted away into product UI that then drives better outcomes for the user. But you're right, like it is just a constant iterative kind of measure, and a lot of these guys will track the number of times it takes to the right cut effectively, like how many times, how many failed attempts.
Mm-hmm.
But it definitely hasn't been cracked. Like no one's really cracked that product experience. I know the Flow, the Google product there, I've heard really good things about that. Yeah, no one's really cracked it.
Have they made any way with generation of font, text? Is that a part of the discussion? I mean, do you hear much about that? Because that's my number one thing, always has been, is as soon as you want to generate something with text, like the actual video of people and everything looks amazing. And then you have some random gibberish. I mean, is that part of the benchmarks in any way, or?
It was for a while. That was mainly in the image model generation, and they would, and it's actually in some of the specific benchmarks. So there's a variable in some of the benchmarks you can see, and they have their own benchmarks around this seed dance. These guys publish it. It depends. Like if you're just generating like the text within the product, within the shot or shots, then if you're doing it for say like a product visualization or an ad, then it needs to be right on the brand, for example, and then they work really hard on just trying to get those things to be better in their reinforcement learning, in the model training, and then they have LoRa adapters that are really good at certain component parts of those things. But if you're building like a web product, it's different because you might just abstract that away and put it on like that might just be text that's generated by an LLM that goes over the top of the image, for example, if it's like a web product or an app or something that's dynamically generated in a product. So it's different depending on the application. It's not as important. Yeah, you can see, here are the charts. Video bench, effective video bench. And then they've got all these like specific benchmarks, like the aesthetics, how good it can deliver motion, how fast is it, all of that sort of stuff. They benchmark themselves on these specific like ELO kind of rankings.
Yeah, what's the deal with Sora and all of this? Because that was a huge thing when it came out, big buildup, and I don't hear anything about it. I mean, do you know? Or is OpenAI working on new models, or that's just not their focus anymore?
I haven't heard. They're obviously not prioritizing it. I assume because they don't have I assume it's because they don't have ready access to training data, but I don't know about that. I think there's a reason why the seed dance model dominates, and it comes from the company that runs TikTok, right? Which is another reason why the lack of performance from Meta in this space is kind of galling, because they have so much access, right? But I guess they would have to have a reasonable conversation with a lot of their users to really leverage it potentially. But yeah, I think that's probably the reason. Maybe the other reason is they think like the ChatGPT 4 image generation model was very good. Like it is very, very good, but maybe video just isn't as critical for their user patterns. So they maybe just deprioritize it. I think it was wild when it came out at first. They made the splash, but yeah, they haven't really kept up with it.
Right.
But who knows?
Yeah.
Who knows what they
way back in the day, like a few months ago?
Oh, it was like a year and a half ago, I think those videos started coming out from them. Yeah. Yeah, that's what I wanted to show you. It's pretty wild, hey?
Sorry, 1 second. My dog banging on the door. Hey, Bear. Say hello.
What demo do you want to do?
Open Deep Research would be good.
Yeah, cool.
Because they're like, if you read through that, there's a lot in there. It's not just like one agent demo.
Yeah, sick.
And then
Okay, cool.
to compare, I also have OpenAI customer service demo that they put out, just to kind of compare, have both sides if you'd like.
The reason we thought we could talk about this is there was a lot of discussion and ongoing discussion about agent structures. There were 2 blog posts that came out almost like very similar timing, and then the LangChain guys also commented on it. This one here, and then from Anthropic. Then there was another one with sort of a counter view from the Cognition team. So we thought it'd be good to talk about this and then talk about like what we think about agent architectures, and then you can take us through a couple of demos that you've got prepared.
Yeah, it was funny reading these back to back, and it seems like they are saying completely different things, but I don't really think they are. What was your take on that?
There were a couple of things, particularly in this Don't Build Multi-Agents one from Cognition, that I thought were interesting, which I think we could talk about, which is slightly different to what was being said in the Anthropic one. What I thought was the most fundamental thing is sort of like basically people in the industry defining the job of a using these as a tool to define the job of an agent engineer or an AI engineer as context engineering. So kind of everything you're doing is trying to optimize and deliver the context for agents, in these flows, and it's sort of like a debate on the best approaches for that, for the tasks and the structure. Is that sort of, that's how I was reading it. There's a couple of like comments I've got, but that was sort of the overview.
Yeah, my takeaway was kind of like advocating for more like microservices, microarchitectures, maybe
From Anthropic.
from Cognition. So,
What do you mean by that?
what were your primary takeaways from the Anthropic paper?
It's sort of like, what I thought was interesting is they said like juice up a key model that's really high quality, that basically keeps and maintains the process of subtasks. Like, yeah, right here, like this high level architecture, a lead agent effectively. One that controls and manages the spin up and spin down of sub agents for specific tasks that are non-deterministic. So as in like, sorry, not non-deterministic, where the end outcome is not currently determined. So this architecture is sort of like, basically, if you've got a task or a job, so deep research, it's like if you say, I want to do some deep research on emerging memory architectures for AI apps, you don't know what the report is going to be like, right? When you ask for that. And this architecture is, in their mind, the best approach. Which is very different from like the architecture you may adopt in the context of something which might be more deterministic, like fix this bug in my code base. What I found, I guess, like to jump right to it, sort of what I found most interesting about these two papers is in the Cognition one, they basically said, look, you probably don't need multi-agent structures, right? Most of the time. And the best approach, in their opinion, what they think is the future will hold, is basically a sequential agent architecture will be the best. I'm assuming because they're expecting the latency kind of element of that to go away. Maybe the processes will get way faster, so it's just sequential because the outcomes are better. And then you've got that context compression component where you can just optimize the process from point to point. So it's not all because the context bandwidth is constrained, even if like theoretical context goes up, effective context is not necessarily as good. For example, some of the research that came out that I was interested in when they mentioned that is a lot of the context that you give to an LLM is like optimized for what's at the start and what's at the end, but not necessarily what's in between, even if it's got a really long context window, or the way that the context is structured and highlighted and informed into the next sequence or into the sub-agent has a significant impact. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was probably the most interesting thing, because that's not necessarily what I think, say, the LangChain guys, or say what's being said in this Anthropic paper as the recommended approach, which is like, yeah, the lead agent, and it controls the number of sub-agents.
Yeah, I guess the reason that I said they're not saying two worlds apart different things, because the Anthropic paper talks a lot about all the potential issues that you can have, and the more steps that you add to your orchestration and your workflows, there's so many areas for issues, like error correction, and you can make it overly complicated when you really don't need to. That was kind of my takeaway.
What do they mean by that? Like error, like the reduction in
Yeah, I
errors,
mean,
right?
if you have, I don't remember verbatim what Anthropic
Yeah.
said, so if I butcher this, my apologies. But if you have like a long running multi-agent architecture, and you have to put in a lot of rules that say if it errors here, do this. And if you have, I mean, I've designed plenty of these things, and it takes a lot to make sure that it runs all the way through. Um, it's funny, we were talking about like doc ETL, and the woman who charged that, she was talking about the same thing in terms of like ETL process and their agentic ETL process that it took like 20 agents, I think, or something like that to make that all run fluidly. So
What I like, yeah, what I find interesting about this is it's kind of like a bunch of engineers trying to figure out a way for multiple agents to collaborate when those systems, well, LLMs, will provide non-deterministic responses, right? And so an error is defined as something that was unexpected in the return. Like, because if it's an error, which is like, all right, the whole thing broke, then that's actually different, like to what we're describing. Like an error is actually, say, the context that was passed to this sub-agent on research for this component part of a deep research, paper was poor. So therefore the response came back incorrectly because it didn't consider a certain source or whatever it was. And that's exactly what happens when you work as a team, right?
yeah, that's
That's
true.
actually like what it's like engineers describing bugs in humans, like, because that's actually what happens with people when people work together. And you go off, like some year assistant goes off and then works on something. He's like, oh, actually, like, it wasn't really supposed to be like that. And it's like, I don't know how much can you engineer, like when it's a long running agentic task that you don't know the response yet. Isn't that always going to be present in systems like this?
Yeah, it absolutely is. And that's why but you have to account for it, right?
Mm.
An example would be like I was doing a little bit with the swarm architecture. And I
Can
don't
you
know.
can you explain that slightly?
Yeah. So in a swarm, maybe, yeah, in a swarm architecture, I think it was OpenAI maybe
Mm.
put out a paper
Yeah,
about
that's
that, and it caused a little bit of some excitement there. But it's essentially a design pattern where you just have a group of agents, and they can make the decisions on which agent is needed next, rather than like a supervisor pattern. So, big difference because in a supervisor, you might have a number of sub agents, and each time it would loop back to the supervisor, and the supervisor has context to make sure that they're delegating appropriately and that it keeps running. The swarm is a little bit more difficult, depending on what you're doing, because each agent doesn't necessarily have the same context. Now, in the LangGraph, LangChain version, if you build it that way, you can build them all in the same graph, so they all have the same context. Um, but you run
mm.
into a lot of issues. Like if you're trying to do something really pretty complex and you want it agent one to know that it needs to call agent three, and then agent three calls agent five. I mean, there's like so many different combinations of calls. So
Right. So in a swarm architecture, every agent has access to every other agent.
yes, exactly, exactly.
What would be the, yeah. So was that architecture posited because there's some sort of like collaborative intelligence that would emerge, hopefully, or collaborative performance would outperform like an individual agent delegating in a supervisor pattern? I can't like, because it sounds chaotic. Like what you're describing sounds chaotic and very impractical.
Yeah. Well, we could come back to that. But I actually have some examples of that I could show. Um,
Yeah, well, that's okay.
trying to find a diagram. But yeah, each agent is aware of each other. They can delegate to each other. And it makes me wonder about like agent to agent. How would that be any different, really? If you can have agents that call each other, don't necessarily have the same context. I don't know. I mean, there's so
I
many
think
different approaches, and to be honest, I'm not someone who necessarily nerds out about all the different design patterns. I think it's trying to what do you need to get done, and what's the most simple way to get there? What's the
Yeah.
straightest path?
Yeah. Well, I guess that's the whole discussion point. The reason why these guys were debating is what is the right architecture in the right context for the task. When you say agent to agent, do you mean the 808 protocol that we were mentioning before?
Right,
Yeah.
right. And I haven't explored
Because
that enough to know.
on that, like specifically in their documentation, they have their diagram, which is like you might have your agent architecture defined as a supervisor pattern in your research agent. And 808 then, and that's a contained unit. And 808 is a protocol for that to then go off and say, look, I really need to get access to, I don't know, the agent that manages your Salesforce, the Salesforce reporting instance. And the Salesforce agent may have its own pattern, and it's a way for them to collaborate. So that when it gets kind of like you and I have my own memory. It's like person to person as opposed to like within the one cognitive architecture.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I mean, to be honest, that's where even if in a swarm, you could have sub-agents as well. I mean, you could have an entire sub-agent design. I'm trying to look. So this is what an
Ooh, that's pretty.
example where you can
So
see
this
it's
is
just a complete
this is
spaghetti
LangGraph,
mess.
right?
What's that?
What is this? So what are we looking at? This is like an
So this
agent
is like a
architecture
swarm.
diagram. Oh, this is a swarm pattern.
Yeah,
right?
where you can
okay,
see,
got
if
it.
I move these around, so you can see every agent has a path to
Yeah. So if you imagine like a node diagram where every node is connected to every other node.
Yes,
Right?
exactly. And it can become messy very fast. The other big thing about these swarm design patterns, and it's not just this one, Hub and Spoke has this as well, but um, you give the agent a tool that is transfer. So like here, if I call transfer to SQL agent, that's a tool call, the transfer part. But what I was saying earlier is if you make this really simple, and then instead of having an agent for every one of these things, maybe you have an agent it's like a React agent that has access to a number of tools, and it's grouped by like type of, what's the purpose? Is it like file manipulation type stuff?
Mm.
So yeah, this is a disaster, man.
Yeah. I'm assuming. Yeah. So I'm assuming that no one's doing that architecture right
Well,
anymore.
that's what I don't know. It became really popular and wasn't that long ago. I don't have a sense for who's using it, when it makes sense necessarily, but played around
Yeah.
with it and I was like, I think a lot of these concepts work and make sense. It's just again, getting past
Yeah. So
the hype cycle. It's like just because you hear everybody start talking about these things doesn't necessarily mean it's the right.
yeah. So in that example, that pattern seems pretty simple and probably was a relic of the fact that, say, MCP protocols didn't exist and other things. So you would create agents that kind of act like tools, right? Which is slightly different. So, for example, like when we were at the LangChain conference, no one talked about any of the agents in production that look like that. And when they were like basically made available as, say, an agentic tool within an organization, the way it was exposed to the developer or the engineering organization was always from its own kind of API endpoints as an application, right? Rather than saying, well, like you've got a swarm of agents out here and you can just engage with all of them via like an agent environment. Sort of sounds like that's what a swarm architecture is, which would be completely chaotic, I'm assuming, if it wasn't, if you're trying to do anything in production.
Did you just say the applications as agents?
Yeah, it's kind of like an agent kind of application effectively. So I'm thinking specifically of the BlackRock guys in their talk. They basically had to build like it was powered by LangChain solutions that any engineering team could build on top of and integrate with across all of their different other applications within their organization. So it's kind of like an internal agentic solution that could be engaged with by other engineering teams, and they had to build an interface in and out of it so that it could be maintained and on top of their, basically within their infrastructure stack.
Yeah. Yeah. And Tom, I mentioned to you, I guess while we're
I'll
there,
put it in the notes and we can check it again.
yeah, I don't know if this is related at all, but I like to demo these LangGraph agents. Um, we've talked about A2A, all these different design patterns, and so I'll just jump to something that I'm excited about, but I also don't quite know where this is going or where it makes sense. But just an example, like I had that swarm pulled up here, so you can see that in Lang Smith over to the right. Well, I think I have this in my Claude desktop. Yeah, I have this in Claude desktop. So Claude desktop, like Claude is an agent itself, right? It has
Mm.
it has no prior knowledge of my tool swarm agents, but with model context protocol, it does, right? So I just enabled that tool call and
Well, tool swarm transfer to SQL agent. Okay.
we'll see if it gets it the first try. Yeah, so it called my tool swarm as a tool. So it's calling the LangGraph agent as an MCP tool. And then if we over here on the right, you can see these traces. So yeah, I guess I don't know. The point is it can get really complex and multi-layered, and I don't think you necessarily have to. And to me, it's
Is this the
more about like specialized, like very specialized, simple agents and very effective tools. What was
yeah?
that?
Well, yeah, agents. Agents do the thinking, tools get the data, right? And this that you're showing me here, is this the update that you were talking about where you could effectively create agents as, like, you could build your agents in the LangChain stack and then effectively create, like, or publish them as MCP, like an MCP server
Yeah,
behind them?
exactly. So this tool swarm, this is an agent that I have published in LangGraph Cloud or LangGraph Platform. So you can access this a number of different ways, right? We talked about like the open agent platform. Um, of course, you can build your own web interface over it. And now you can have your agents as MCP tools, which I think is a total game changer. I've been using this type of stuff ever since we got back from the conference, and I realized that was possible. I've actually been using this a lot.
So talk through some of the applications of this. What's possible now that wasn't possible before?
Yeah. Quick pause. I'm sorry, man. My dog is. I'm gonna go put her
Yeah, yeah.
away. Real quick.
That's okay.
Yep. You still there? Hey Tom, you still? Hey, you still there?
Yeah, sorry, my leg keeps going to
So
sleep because I'm sitting on this bed.
I'm
Walking it
really
off.
sorry about that. I uh usually have her in a crate, and then I was trying to put her in a crate just now, and she's so fast, like I had to chase her. So, anyways,
We feature your dog on the podcast.
yeah,
So yeah, what's possible? What's possible now as a result of this? Like, what have you been playing with? What does it mean?
yeah. Well, think about this. Like, say that you are a customer of mine, and I've designed an agent for you. And now with MCP, all the authorization, authentication stuff,
Mm.
you would add this to your Claude desktop or any MCP client, and you would be able to use that agent that I designed for you. Also, um, I don't know what the proper term is. I guess composability. So think about the fact that Claude or any MCP client is generally an agent. Um, it can act as your orchestrator. So if you have specialized agents that do different things, you can create workflows Like I have some other ones, like researcher. I could say, call the researcher agent, do your research, then call the tools agent, save that research to a file, then have another agent that's like a data analyst, right? So in the LangGraph and any agent architecture, you'd pretty much have to um, program that or code it to do those things, right? They would all have to be part of the same graphs and be able to communicate with each other, where these could all be completely isolated agents that you can still provide that composability. That's what I see. Plus,
Right.
plus the
So,
MCP tools that you have uh, in your desktop as well. So you can combine or basically give your agents access to tools that they don't have.
so it would, like, thinking practically, I could publish a marketplace of available agents, which effectively opens up functionality and skill sets, right? Across agents when they hit a wall or they realize they can't do something or they need something, and then you could expose those. And those can have specific architectures that are designed for those tasks. For example, a data analyst architecture can be optimized for that task without having to be within the actual kind of monolithic. It's kind of like monorepo, right? Like the monolith versus the microservice.
Yeah, exactly.
But
That's what they talked about at Vercel, right? And the
yeah,
guy said, I was always a big believer in monorepos, right? Well, help me out because I
well,
remember him talking about that. And I
yeah,
think that's like exactly what I'm saying here.
that's great. The difference is, so that's the analogy, which was like, um, it's kind of like microservices. Where the analogy breaks is they need to work with each other, right? And so what the cognition guys were talking about is these multi-agent architectures, sort of like if you're exposing it, if you were doing that, they lose context or context degrades if they're not within the flow of if they're not within the same quote unquote graph, then context degrades and therefore quality, like the quality performance components really degrade. So it's like I can give you a galaxy or an ecosystem of potential agents and skill sets or skills agents that have certain performance improvement quality based on their individual architecture. But the whole idea of what they were saying is like that sort of doesn't really work as that well because of the context problem and these compounding errors that develop as that context degrades. And so I don't necessarily know how. I guess that's what they're saying. That's the risk, what they're seeing. Now,
Yeah.
they might have a bias, I guess, based on what they do, because they do, like, it's coding, like, that's their thing, right? And the Anthropic one is not that. It's the deep research or it's the research one. So it's a very
Yeah,
different problem set.
exactly. Everyone's going to have different perspectives. I don't think there's any silver bullet. There never will be. But when you were talking about the context degradation, that reminds me of one of the downsides in my experimentation with this type of using MCP or using agents as MCP tools is then all of the output comes back to your MCP client. So you can only take that so far. And if you're using like Claude, it hits that that maxes out that window pretty quickly if you're doing things like research or things like that. I haven't seen a lot of people talk about it. I'm kind of surprised, but I have another example, and maybe I'll show that too. But it's an MCP tool, but it's an agent, and so on mine it does a deep research using Olama on your desktop. So the Olama agent is doing all the research, collecting all that context, and then it only sends back the output, the final output to Claude.
Yeah.
And that saves tons and tons of tokens, right? So I have not seen a lot about agents that work in the background like that? I don't even
Yeah, so
know.
that would definitely be beneficial, right? So a handoff where you just want an answer, but the answer is complicated. Like, for example, that agent has a virtual environment. They could spin up Python and then they can do some data analysis and they can come back to the requesting agent via the MCP to just give the answer or a concise summary or something. The other, for my own like interest in, say, multimodal agent kind of agent executions over, say, creative and technical work. Although this isn't really the case with LangChain, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it isn't, where you could have theoretically an exposed MCP agent, which is very good at stringing together, say, Comfy UI or, some of those like chain together diffusion model execution runs that then comes back with a piece of like an image or an SVG asset or, a 3JS execution of a visualization or something like that.
To say, well, you can do that. What you're saying to save the context?
I guess to go off to a specialized environment like that. Like LangChain is focused just on LLM executions, right? Whereas you don't have like a execution run that you can put into a LangGraph execution that's like a LangGraph, agent that has, all right, now you have a sub agent, which is a diffusion model, for example, that generates an image.
Yeah, maybe I don't
Or
know.
am I wrong?
I don't see why you couldn't. I'm pretty sure I've done that.
Have
Sorry, are
you?
you?
Okay, cool. Well, in the documentation and everything they talk about is basically they're just like LLMs. It's just LLMs. So you're saying I could have a sub agent that could generate me a song via, or like, convert, or like a VO3 endpoint, like an agent that can execute on VO3 endpoint and then return that as a file, for example. I guess if it was a third-party API endpoint, it would work.
Yeah, it's gonna return generally a like base 64 version. But yeah,
Okay, and that's why you're the agent, the developer expert.
you know what I've been doing? Like sometimes, if you have too many tools configured, I'll like screenshot these and say use this tool, or I mean you can type it too, but um,
Oh, that's
since I was
funny.
on it, I'll just finish this out so you can see.
Yeah, I love. Yeah,
Maybe,
keep going. Sorry, you can edit that bit out if you want. If it was too much of a tangent.
okay, so here this agent it's very similar to the newer deep research that they put out. You can configure different settings, like if you want to use Tavily or a different search provider, and then you can configure your model. I haven't actually updated this in a while, so by default, I guess it's still set to Llama 3.2. But you can see here that in the output, I didn't actually get any output from like all the different steps of the Llama Deep Researcher agent that runs locally. So in this example, I just get the final output if this actually ran. But I also have it configured with Lang Smith. So although I don't see that output on the front end, I can see. Well, this was kind of ad hoc, but you should see the traces. So I have it set up so the Llama agent still runs the traces, and you can see all that background work.
Yeah, in LangSmith.
So,
I've never
anyways,
done
yeah,
that.
you get
I've never set that
the
up
idea.
locally.
Yep.
That's super cool, man.
Yeah, it starts. I don't know. It starts to become very like Inception, and like again, at some point for me, it's like I'm not necessarily concerned with what the name of the pattern is. Um, you just have to know the different things to take into consideration, like context windows, um, error error handling, stuff like that. So, Tom, you want to kick it over? We can run through this Olama, or I'm sorry, not Olama, the LangChain open deep research.
I would love for you to talk me through this because this is pretty relevant. So this is an open source project that they've published relatively recently, the LangChain guys. And when they do this, they're basically building these agents so that people like us, developers, can see what can be built, right? And their recommended architecture based on their expertise with the platform, or the framework.
Yeah, they're really good about when like OpenAI or someone comes out with something that makes a big splash, they turn around and create like an open source version of it, pretty much.
The open version. Yeah. So whenever there's like, they did with computer use, like the demo that I showed you a couple of weeks back. This one is basically a replication of ChatGPT, Google Gemini, equivalent. This will be interesting because I was literally just chatting to the guys over when I had lunch there with them. I think they're working on an update or an upgrade to this, and we were talking through some of these trade-offs and how the architectures work to trying to compare the architecture of, say, the Gemini deep research approach, which apparently is pretty basic and very sequential, to the more complicated ones like the Claude or the OpenAI ones. So how much have you played with this? Did you spin it up? Well, I guess talk us through what we're looking at now.
Yeah,
This is
I think what's really
architecture.
cool about this for a demonstration is that it's not just one pattern necessarily. There are 3 different designs here. So you can see that I've got it broken up by workflows, and then there's a multi-agent version. The big difference is the multi-agent version allows you to basically converse with an agent about the subject and start like really develop what it is you want to do the research on. And then it goes into the multi-agent workflow and works with multiple specialized agents like, citations agent, stuff like that. So I'll spin this up and show you. It's pretty straightforward to set up to get installed. I don't know if you care to, I guess I can't really do it from scratch because I already set it up, but.
No, we can share the instructions in the link.
Yeah.
If you just follow those, there's plenty of tutorials online that talk through this. They've probably also got one that goes through the process. So yeah, spin it up and show it to us. So just to clarify, did you set it up as the supervisor, like that kind of interaction pattern one, or as the more basic, like just do some research, split it out by sections, and then combine into the final version?
Well, that's the cool part is you don't have to spin up different. It's all part of the same. Well, they're separate graphs, but it's all the same application. When I run LangGraph dev, we have the ability to switch between all 3 of them. So got to activate the virtual environment first. I started getting this upgrade error. I guess I thought I did that earlier, but anyways. So Tom, this is what I meant. I just spun up I just hit LangGraph dev and now have the option to select between these 3 different graphs. So when I select these, that's what's awesome about LangGraph is the visual aspect is really helpful. So here we have the ODR workflow. And when I was running this with as an MCP tool with Claude, this is the right way because this is just a workflow. So Claude kind of does that conversational planning and then kicks it into the workflow once we're ready. So we'll start with the workflow. On this one, we will just give it a topic. So let's say Google Gemini CLI. So here you can see each step along the way. So it's going to generate the report plan, and then it will give us a chance to provide input. What was that?
So it basically converts it into some form first. So there's a chain of there's a chain behind that. Yeah. Here are the thinking traces.
Yeah. Sorry, it jumped.
This is sick. I love watching this stuff.
I'll let this finish and then we can walk through it.
Yeah, this is great. Can you click on one of the summary, one of the items? Just open up one of those so you can see. What's the search API they're using Tavily?
Well, that's cool. That's a cool part as well. They've set this up so that you can use basically any, as far as I'm concerned, any search provider. And I'll show that. You can configure that in the GUI here. You don't even have to change the code.
Right.
Maybe
Just
while
on that,
that's
while you're
running,
pulling that up, that was the most amazing thing about the answer engine optimization presentation that we were talking about at the start of the episode. So ChatGPT is optimized for, it uses Bing, the Bing API, search API. And so one of the biggest things is basically just optimize for Bing search. So we're just going to sit like Bing is just going to be like one of the most important products that you can possibly engage with and sense check and get to know how the API works, which is pretty hilarious.
yeah. So while that's running, I just started a new session here, but you can see if you spin this up and then you select your graph that you want to work with, then down here, this button that says Manage Assistance. This is where you can actually create different versions that use different search providers. You can even go between Anthropic, OpenAI, or other providers as well. I think by default they had Grok also set up.
This is rad. So they've got, all right, clarify with users on the sections, clarify with the user yes or no. That's really cool.
Yep. And the other thing that's worth pointing out here is you see this says summarization model. It's set to Claude Haiku.
Mm.
And then further down, you have Planner, right? So we have all these different models, and we talked about that with OpenAI, right? You have to kind of understand what all these different models do, and they're particularly good at certain things. So if you understand what models are good at different things, you can set them up to be specialized. And also, there's cost considerations there as well, right? So that's why up here you might use Haiku for the
Yeah, for
summarization.
summaries, yeah.
Yeah, the summarization is going to take a lot of text and condense it down. The smaller models are totally capable of summarization. And then when you use your more expensive and capable models, um, you want them to be more like the reasoning steps, right? So,
What is the model? Can you clarify what the model KWAG is? Do you know what that is? Or some of these other settings like recursion limit says the number of structured output retries, all of those sorts of things. Is that if it fails, like failovers, and how many times it should dare just to do something before just throwing an error?
yeah, that's exactly what it like max structured output retries. If it errors, how many times do you want to keep doing that? I mean, I think you could set this as high as you would like, but then if it just keeps going in a loop and
Yeah,
airing,
just
you might
take a
spend
timeout.
$70. And I think that was last time. And for anyone who watched the last episode, I had a scare and I thought it charged like $70 for one run. It actually didn't. It was a bunch of failures that just kept running in the background. Yeah, and you said, I mean,
And
there are a
underneath
lot
each
of
model,
settings. That's why initially when I opened this up, I thought it was a simple demo, but it's actually a lot. You have so many different configuration options. Can really repurpose this for whatever you'd like. All right, so let's go back and see what we got. I don't see any errors. That's always good. Okay.
so this is the structured like report based on, just saying Google Gemini CLI. Can you go to the report and just look at it? Look at it for a second.
Yeah, that's what I was looking for.
This
So there's all
section.
these different hierarchies, and it's kind of a pain to click through. But this is not how you would actually use this. This is a development tool, right?
Yeah, of course. It's very cool.
So I believe this is this is the final output, practical applications for developers. See, this is not as detailed as what I would have expected, but I'm looking for where it shows each section. Mm. And if you don't know, you can adjust the granularity of these traces with this slider
Oh, that's
here.
cool.
So that's really helpful. Maybe I just don't have it.
What are you looking for?
I was looking for the final report. So I'll just jump over to the chat window. And that's also pretty awesome how you can switch between this graph view and this chat. As you can see, once you go through so many different steps, it gets a little bit hairy. So if you jump over to the chat view, it's a little bit easier to read. Okay, so I think this is the final output. And as you can see,
in that chat, like in this chat interface, say this is like what you were looking at when you publish the system, right? So if you were to put this on a website or put it in a product, if you chat with that, does it then rerun the research process, or is it then an end state, which is just returned to just the chat model? So you can just ask questions and it will return like basically to return from the context of what its output, or is it actually like, all right, now does it just go back through the graph?
you're saying so this is a workflow, right? So this one will basically, I believe that would start back at the generate report plan. Yeah.
Yeah, right. So it's just gonna generate again, right?
Yeah, it's not necessarily going to recall, and then that's where the multi-agent workflow. We'll show that next.
Just click cancel. There we go.
Yep.
Yeah, so change the model, like change the architecture. I'm keen to see. Can you just start a new session now?
And I had Tom, I set this up on the cloud as well. I don't remember how much I modified it, so I wasn't going to show that necessarily, but we have that set up on our.
It's in the build demos.
Yep.
Toolkit.
Yeah, like
link on the website. Right. Cool.
Well, we'll just show this real quick. So this is the same exact workflow that I just ran through, but this is more like what it would look like in a typical client application.
Yeah.
Oh, come back to that. So, all right. So let's do the multi-agent workflow. So Tom, what's something you want to know more about?
Let's keep it on the AI engineering front, and maybe plug in most recent developments and approaches to context engineering as a practice, and see what it picks up. I'm really keen to also see like what the AI kind of evaluation and ranking on search of some of the blog posts that we've talked about, because it's like a relatively recent discussion point.
Yeah.
Like, does it pick that stuff up?
Okay, so you saw it went from start to the supervisor, and then the supervisor has, as you can see, if I hover over, it has different tools that we'll call.
And when you hover over that, basically there is a relationship between the tools and also the research team. And this is the research team.
Sorry, it's hard to, it's like so much information. It's hard, you get kind of lost.
It's fast.
It's hard to talk and at the same time.
Can you expand what the research agent's doing? Just expand that so we can see it.
It's still,
it's not showing.
It's still going. So see how this, this section now is, why don't I see the entire thing? This is different than my query, right? So it interpreted my initial input, and then it said, okay, we're going to create a report with multiple different sections. And so what we should see here is a breakdown of basically the LLM generated queries or prompts for each section.
Got it. And then when it says fork 7 of 7, that's just the turns, right?
Yeah. So this is where you see some errors. Also with the Anthropic, I think Anthropic is configured with one of these, and I run into a bunch of rate limit issues with that. Is that what this is complaining about? Yeah. Rate limit.
Oh, so that's the sections architecture there.
Yeah. Okay. Now I can see the actual, like the full chain. Sorry about that. So I said, I want to learn about the most recent developments and approaches to context engineering. So then the supervisor agent hit Tavily, and it basically said the same thing, except it improved the prompt, optimized it for Tavily.
Then these are the sources, right? Sorry, you keep going there.
We see here how it actually provided a summary rather than just spitting out the entire. And actually, Tavily, maybe that was Tavily that provided only the response or the summary. I mean, so In this guide, I synthesize insights from foundational blog posts on the emergence of context engineering. And then it provides tons of information, tons and tons of information there. And they kicked it back to the supervisor. And then it says the evolution of context engineering, core principles of context engineering. It basically synthesized and regenerated that another prompt. I don't know if this will keep running. So now it's having the rate limit issues, which is interesting because I didn't think this one was actually set up with Anthropic, but let's see if we can just change it. I believe almost any model should work, but I know that by default it was using 4.0, so I'll just use 4.0 for now. All right, so it created it as a new assistant, so you can actually run multiple different versions. Whoops, start a new thread. Yeah, Tom, thanks for always for your patience. Like I said, running demos like this live, it's very dangerous.
That's all right. I have a feeling that the live demos we see on YouTube are heavily edited.
Yeah, exactly. We do it for real here at the build.
Well, you do, particularly these ones.
Well, it's also I've set it up so many different ways, and there are so many different combinations of how you can run these things that it's hard to remember.
What I'm really keen to understand is like the pass back in the communication between the supervisor and the sub agent, like the research team, to actually see some of the traces. Yeah, so like
so
that
this is
handoff.
actually much, much better. Seems like it's running much more smoothly. Let's try the workflow.
So explain the difference in the architecture for this. What's
So on
different to
this,
the multi-agent?
well, I didn't have a good example in the multi-agent. I'll try it again, or I'll snip it back in here. But what should happen is it comes back and it has like an interrupt step. So the multi-agent asks you along the way, hey, here's my plan so far. Does this sound good? Oh, I guess this one does too. So here, and it even says interrupt right here. So this is the human in the loop step. So it says, please provide feedback on the following plan. And it lists out the headings and the description of what it's going to output for the final plan on each section.
That's really cool.
So
is that in the actual assistant prompt? Like when you click on that, can you see what's actually programmed in that prompt? Because that's very different. Yeah, here. That's sort of different, like what people are used to with, say, OpenAI's one is it's like, I just want to ask a few clarifying questions first. And yeah, so it's like main body sections.
Sorry, you were asking about the interrupt step?
Yeah, what I really want to understand is like, what is it? What's the prompt that's like, all right, is it as simple as like create the plan, then present the entire plan to the user? Or are there multiple steps? Like, is it more complicated than that? What's interesting about these tools is these deep research tools.
The interrupts are not going to be a prompt. They are.
No, yeah. It's like basically return this to the user for feedback, right?
Right, exactly.
But the initial prompt,
so
there must be an initial prompt that's like, just has that in there. Create the plan, right?
Yeah. Yeah, so this is pretty cool. We can just say everything looks good or true, and then it will continue down that path. So I think, this is just one section. So you see it wrote that section. See, it's like so much output. It's really hard to analyze every step. But this is where if you're running this type of thing in production, you're not going to be analyzing traces manually like this. You would then use evaluations, and the cool thing is you could evaluate like each step along the way.
Yeah, it's great to see how it works under the hood, though. Like, I love actually seeing this. This is one of the benefits of, I think, LangGraph, right? Is you can actually dive into the component parts really easily in the UI.
Yeah, and actually the the studio is cool and everything, but if you're looking at traces, the Langsmith view here is actually a lot better. So already when I look at the trace view here, you can see how many different steps. I mean, this is
Yeah. So explain
Quite
this a bit, like
crazy.
the traces, like what are we looking at? So that's a step in the graph, generate the
Yeah,
report plan.
this is every single step along the way. Whether it's tool call, agent transfer. I guess an agent transfer is a tool call in most cases, um, or like particular tool use. Tavily, that's a tool, so you can see all along the way, and then of course you can filter on any one of these items on the left. You can filter through and really evaluate like what are the tools doing, what kind of output am I getting. It's just I love this view. It's so much easier to read, um, and you see so many things that you would miss otherwise. So,
So that one you're on right there is like an evaluation,
well,
grade,
this is
fail,
not an
follow up queries.
evaluation.
Well, sorry, like
Sorry, what was it?
well, kind of like it's like I need to evaluate. It's like it's a prompt, but it's like I need to evaluate whether the provided section content adequately addresses the specified section topic. So it's kind of like how the assistant for that component part of the graph is structured within the code, but you don't have to actually go into the code. You can just see it here. And then this is the
Yep,
response, right?
exactly, exactly. And then
Yeah, this is really cool.
you can add these traces to you can create data sets or value. Like if I wanted to filter down and say like only show the errors, and then I want to only select those, and then I can hit add to data set, and then you can run evaluations, and that's where you can do things like we've talked about like LLM as a judge. So you have your AI, you have an LLMs uh, running the same prompts multiple times, and then you get the output, and then the LLM evaluates that output, and it tells you, uh, it grades it. So
Yeah, a simple way to use that in this context, right, would be run an evaluation on an LLM as a judge, defining its like how concise or how concise the report is, or how pleasant and easy is it to read, or its reading level grading, for example, like grade it to a reading level, and then you can use it to optimize the prompts within each chart, each part. Right?
yep, exactly, exactly. So yeah, I mean that's sorry for all the errors, but like I said, this project is actually a little bit of a beast, and hats off to the LangChain team because this is really cool. And like I said, you could repurpose this for so many different things, not necessarily just research. Um, so I'm excited.
Yeah, I would love to actually do that now that you've given me the demos, to try and like repurpose it for a specific occupational task, which is research bound. So for the use case I'm thinking of, maybe I can try and I'll do a counter demo where it's like a customization for you. But the use case I'm thinking of is I work in the real estate industry, and in specific contexts, it's very important to do a lot of heavy research, even if it's desktop research on certain locations or certain properties and a range of different data sets. But the output is actually kind of like a really long form report. If you think about like a commercial building and a property appraisal on a commercial building, it's actually kind of like a document output. It's not really like just charts and some numbers. So funneling those through and how well it could be optimized for an end person who might be need to do an evaluation on a property, that would be a great. That's just one use case of probably 100 I could think of that.
Yeah,
When you use
I
the
was
demo,
also I was doing a little bit of experimentation, and I won't I won't drag you through this one, but we talked about open agent platform. So this set this up. It's running hosted in the cloud, and with this, it's the no code uh, setup, so you can design different agents by giving them system prompts and access to tools and RAG essentially. So like, I don't know if this will work, but I'll try it real fast. So we have these same different multi-agent and different workflows that we were running before. So if I were to add, I have to create, basically I was going to say is like, if I add access to RAG and tools to these agents, so then I've just expanded on the capabilities, and we could do like search for information from my organization and then go research using that exact same design pattern. So very flexible, and there's just so many possibilities. It's just whatever your imagination, and not only your imagination, but um, designing them intelligently, right? Like not going too crazy because it can happen fast.
Well, that was basically the summary. The cognition one is like, just don't go nuts, right?
Yeah, right.
Just
So
ease up on the complexity. I'd love to be able to expose something like that over like internal data set or internal document set. Like even audit like there's so many reports and things that need to be written in organizations that are so boring and laborious and really hard. Like auditing board reports or financial audits. Like there's all sorts of stuff that people have to do. Providing like a summarization to bring on a new vendor or to become a vendor for someone, that I just wish there were agents for every company, for every person. Like that's a public service. I think, Cameron, you should create.
yeah, I mean I 100% agree with you. So I'll just say that. All right. We can make this one real quick, but just to contrast a little bit, this is the OpenAI a customer service demo. So they have like an agent or airline agent, and each one of these squares here is a separate agent. I don't know if they have a diagram in this. Oh, look, no, they don't. So that's why what I try to. What's funny is I took this OpenAI project, and I just sent it through Codex. And Codex, from what I've seen, most people are like doing bug checks and things like that. And I converted it to a LangGraph agent. The reason I did that was to be able to see basically the graphs. So I want to just pull that up real quick so you can see the difference between some of those others that we showed. So in this example, they have a triage agent.
Oh, that's fascinating. That's
So
cool.
it first goes to the triage agent, and essentially, I guess maybe it's similar to like it's pretty much like a supervisor. Um, and instead of that swarm pattern that I pulled up that looked like a big mess, you you basically have more direct lines to the specialized agents. Okay, so let's do book a flight. So it'll hit going straight to the triage agent, and then it should recognize, oh, we need to call the booking agent. So then it will ask you questions like, where do you want to go? My preferred seat.
Like, okay,
Usually it asks you, oh, whoa, I haven't seen this. I've
right.
only run through this a couple times, but it typically was asking, where do you want to go first? Okay, so let's say
That's pretty sick.
one
That's cool.
1B. Yeah, that part, that's awesome. I didn't see that before. If you need any further changes, let me know. Okay. So, oh, you know what I just realized is that my previous like book a
Yeah.
flight, it was in
Book a
the
session.
memory. Okay. So it was already
Yeah.
booked. Yeah. Yeah. So if I say like, okay, let's say what's the status of my flight? I'll kick it over to the flight status agent. But you see down here, it kind of shows you the traces, not necessarily the same as what we were looking at in Langsmith, but you can see it's doing a lot of the same general tool calls and things like that. So on seat booking handoff, that's a tool call. So I think that's pretty cool. And what I have spent about zero time on is the OpenAI traces. Tom, maybe you have more experience than I do, but if you actually log into the API dashboard, or I guess this is the assistance.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
I've used this more, to be honest.
Yeah. So
But
I
it's
think it's
not
a
as
little bit more,
detailed.
not as detailed, which I mean, this is definitely easier to read. That's for sure, which is good for right now. But I prefer to have um, the granularity, right?
Yeah, I was actually interested to see what the guardrail, like how complicated the guardrail checkpoint is in the flow. And it's basically just like, is this relevant? That's the prompt. It's just a prompt, right? That's cool.
Yep. Should we trigger the
You try and
guardrail?
break it.
Say,
Well, just
what
like the
the
usual one
fuck
is,
are you doing? Whoa. So hit the jailbreak guardrail.
yeah,
Detect and block attempts to bypass or override system instructions. That's not what I was doing at all, but I figured it's probably a generic,
yeah,
pretty generic setup. If I say that was an accident, it will clear this back, clears
yeah,
it back
okay.
to green. Okay, we're good to
Or
go.
what if you say
So
like, can you book me a train ticket, please? And see if it's got enough nuance. Yeah, relevance guardrail
er,
there.
I can
Failure.
only, yeah,
Right. So the
yep,
separation of guardrails. That's quite cool. Well, it's cool to see their thinking, I guess. The whole idea around this is how you structure the application. That's really cool.
yeah, yep.
Really cool.
And
Thanks, man. That's a great demo.
yeah, it's hard to say uh, definitely, but I really think that you can accomplish a lot of these things with MCP. So, all right,
What,
cool. Well, that's pretty
yeah,
much the demo. That's pretty much what I have on that. Stop sharing my screen.
that was awesome, man. Thank you. Makes me want to build more agents now.
Yeah, except those, like I said, it's depends on how you run it. Like I have those same LangGraph agents, but if you run it, with the Claude desktop versus the other web interface, it's just not a problem that I had before because I was not building agents that are like used by all these different clients. So maybe a new problem, just maybe just my problem at the moment. I don't know, but it's got me thinking about different things I wasn't before. That's for sure.
Yeah. I'm actually interested, like, so there's a lot of chat interactions, right, when you're building agents. And I'm wondering if there's like a rollout pattern that you could adopt as an organization where you basically just launch very simple chat interaction apps that just have tool calls over the top of them at the start as a way to engage with different teams. So, right, we'll roll this out, make it super simple, not necessarily customer facing like agents that do things, but like say if you're a business and you're building an internal team and then use those traces to try and develop a strategy over the top of them based on the data that you see coming in to build agents that actually start executing. So I don't know if you've read anything or seen anything on that. I had that thought this week. I'm like, well, is there a way you could recommend to organizations, say, just do this, but do it in this way so that you can extract the insights for the most relevant tasks to build into agents based on what you have, as opposed to building anything at the start like agents, because they would just fail and then you might burn your bridges with your stakeholders.
Right. Well, if that's like Microsoft Power Platform. That's essentially what that is, right? Like you set up
Yeah, over
um,
the top of teams, right?
like little bots, and little automation workflows, but those could also be agentic, right? Or parts of agents. So it's a good starting point.
Yeah, that's a bigger conversation. All right, man. Did you have anything else? Or do you want to call it?
Yeah, I don't think so. I mean, yeah, I think that was it.
I've got about 50 other things I could talk to you about, but I think let's call it
Yeah,
now.
well, that's why I paused. That's why I paused because I'm like, well, we've been talking forever here, and I know you're on the roads.
Yeah,
I
man.
think I'm good. Um, yeah, you headed back?
Yeah, and back to the West Coast Monday. Going out for a sweet New York dinner and then I'm out of here. All right.
Hell yeah.
Well, thanks, man.
Well,
This
have
has been a
tons
lot
of
of fun.
fun. Wish I was there. Yeah, we'll talk next time.
Yeah.